I'd like to introduce, obviously, Kathy Hibbard is with us. You can see her on the screen. She's the vice principal here of the school. And Andrea Charlton is here with us. Andrea is one of our parents, and she's going to be answering some questions. We had a second parent who is supposed to be here with us today as well, but I know she would actually really prefer to be here right now. She's at Sick Kids with her son, who is getting a cast. So he's just broken a finger in a not a great way. So that would be not a fun place to be today. So unfortunately, Andrea is doing the loggerhead of the work for us today then. So
That's my pleasure, Paul. No problem.
you've been here for a number of years, so you can probably speak to everything at the school pretty well. Excellent.
I think so. And Paul, should I just maybe start from the beginning in terms of why we chose JA? Would that make sense?
Yes, so that was going to be my first question, is why did you choose Junior Academy originally?
So I must admit, one reason was extremely practical. We have boy-girl twins, and I learned early on this journey to make everything simpler for ourselves as a family. So that was sort of reason number one. But really the reason I tracked down JA in particular, as an educator myself, I had seen firsthand the impact of having a child at a school where if a particular need were ever to crop up along the way, if it was easier to put those kinds of supports into place, it tended to lead to a far more successful outcome for that child. So I'd seen it firsthand professionally, and I decided, this would be really great if I could find a place that could do that. And I really have found that JA walks the walk around, if need be, only if need be, supports can be added. And we have ended up using a variety of supports over the years, primarily for only one of our children. And we've actually more recently been able to peel them back. So that has worked out. And then the last reason why I really found JA appealing is they truly do zoom in on each individual child. So I've mentioned that we have twins. They're unbelievably different people. And yet each of them has, in very different ways, been invited to stretch and to grow and to mature, even more than I think I would have anticipated. And I think I perhaps underestimated the degree to which the school would be able to really pinpoint what each of them would need, both holding them to some very clear standards and yet all the way along giving them a little bit of elbow room to figure things out.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrea. In what ways was the school kind of what you expected? In what ways were we not what you expected as you came in and got used to us?
I was relieved that my instinct about the school's ability to kind of walk the walk around providing supports was definitely proven to be true. So within our first year, we had some nice pieces in place for one of our children, easy access to some OT time, for instance. So that definitely met my hopes and expectations. And then I think the piece which was a really delightful and somewhat unexpected discovery was that the culture of the place really jives with what my husband and I valued most. So we are each people who, we know the game of the independent school world very well, but we are more interested in community and fit and happiness in our children more than anything else. And so I think it was the warmth of the community and the genuine inclusiveness of it. I decided, didn't quite expect this, but boy, what a nice kind of cherry on the top.
That's fantastic. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andrea. If you had to boil it down to maybe one of the biggest impacts that Junior has had on one or both of your children, because you do have two here, what would that be?
I was giving this some thought, Paul. It was kind of tricky to pinpoint, and yet It's actually quite simple. I think the most important piece is that they have each become very confident people. Um, we had an okay experience at our local school in JK and SK. For one of our children in particular, it's fair to say the SK experience was bordering on traumatic. There was a bullying piece. And so I was hoping that with all the right pieces in place, confidence would grow. But that has certainly happened for both of them. And as I'm sure we all are aware, until someone feels confident, they can't actually put their energy into getting better at things or
Mhm.
taking risks or challenging themselves. So I think that's been number one.
Fantastic. It's so great to hear. And I know, having known them now for year 5, that I've been here, I've seen that confidence grow immeasurably as well. So
I'm sure it's had its interesting moments, Paul, but
everybody has interesting moments, right? And that's what's one of the wonderful pieces about this. If we asked one of your children what they would have to say about the school, what do you think they would share?
so the first thing I would disclose with 100% honesty, neither child, even after having a tricky day, has ever refused to go to school. Like we've never had one of those horrible mornings. And we've had a few chapters, as we all do. So I think that really speaks to their sincere comfort with the place. They have each let it slip in a variety of ways over the years. They really like knowing all the adults in the building. So even if they've only known some teachers from afar, they know their names. They have a good sense of what they're all about. Um, that has kind of added to the allure of each successive year. Oh, I wonder if I would have that teacher. So that felt good. And they definitely, um, it's funny seeing me as an educator dealing right now with very unique circumstances at school in schools across the world. They actually now have definitely commented on the real bonus that JA has going for it. Being a smaller school, JA has not had to turn itself into a pretzel to make the cohorting work and so on. Now, I know that's a brilliant piece of luck more than anything else, but it's been a powerful reminder of the the ways in which a smaller school does have more flexibility in a variety of ways. So I think they've each commented on that.
That's wonderful. I'm glad they're feeling that. And right now, I know from my own perspective, I'm very happy that we're a smaller school, just
Yeah.
to have the bandwidth to do some of those pieces and try and make those changes that are so necessary, but maintaining the culture and the routine of our school environment. That's an
Well,
important.
I can tell you, my students have managed admirably, Paul, but they have had a much more strange experience than our children have had. So I've been really grateful.
That's so wonderful to hear. If you had to represent or talk about the school as a single entity or a single person, and kind of explain its personality in only a few words, how could you explain who we are?
So I've come up with three. The first one is calm, thanks to the predictable, streamlined routines for both children and for families. So I think of that Wednesday email, Paul. I am so grateful. I'm not getting 30 emails a week. If there's one really communicative email, it's just one tangible example of what I mean. The second adjective I'd use, the place strikes me as very grounded. It knows what its priorities are, what it values most, and what its mandate is. And I can tell you, many schools drift, being a little bit unclear about that. So it's very like a grounded person. Um, and lastly, it is genuinely kind. I think I've already mentioned this, but there's an explicit emphasis on community. And along with that, real respect for each and every child. So our children over the years have definitely learned in lots of interesting ways that each one of their peers is to be respected and has his or her own terrific strengths and unique qualities. And I think that has been emphasized just a little bit more at Jay than it might have been elsewhere.
That's wonderful. That leads right into great segue, Andrea. You led right into my next question, just about values and the values of our school, as well as the values of the families in our school community, because that's always an important piece too, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, so some of this I've kind of alluded to already, but I think going back to that emphasis on individual progress, being the kind of the number one goal and valuing that over, for instance, a more competitive environment, seeing that far more distance is gained usually by helping each individual child ooch along at their own pace as they're ready to challenge them appropriately, rather than being met with an explicitly competitive culture. That actually, it's fine for many kids, but I would argue there are many others for whom that can be a bit intimidating. Um, and while I have found that both the school and the parents, they clearly, absolutely, by the way, value academics and those essential numeracy and literacy skills I have observed, with homework and little glimpses I get, definitely being reinforced, but at a reasonable pace, at a developmentally appropriate pace. And I think that's tied in with what I was mentioning earlier about progress over competition. Um, and I've definitely picked up upon that set of instincts among the parents. I have never had the impression the parents are interested in a particularly flashy brand, or as much as I love beautiful green playing fields, I really, in my conversations with them, have heard about the basics being valued and a community being of utmost importance. Um, and again, I'm obviously biased here, but I detect among the parents some fundamental confidence. They are willing to give priority to what I perceive as those fundamentals rather than some elements that have a little bit less substance in life. So it's been a kind, plugged in, grounded kind of crowd.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Anyone who's ever asked me, I've always said we have probably some of the best families and parents and such a supportive community here. And everybody is always rooting for everybody else. And you can see that whenever moms and dads come into the school, at interview times, if we have a game downstairs in the gym, if there's anything going on, everyone is genuinely rooting for everybody and really wants to see the best for everybody under this roof. So it's a pretty wonderful community that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, Andrea, thank you for encapsulating all those values and all of those pieces so well. That was amazing. And I know we had a couple people who joined us partway through. I'll just recap that Andrea is one of our parents. She has 2 children at our school, and she's been here now for many years. Was it 6 years, 7 years now?
I cannot believe it, but we're starting our 7th year.
7th year. Wow. So she's been here for 7 years, and we were to have another parent here as well, also sharing, but she's busy having her son get a cast put on at Sick Kids right now. So she is otherwise busy. Andrea answered a lot of questions about our school, but I'd like to put it out to our parents who are visiting us today as well. If you have a specific question you would like to ask of Andrea, of myself, of Kathy, specifically Andrea can speak about the parent experience.
So Paul, if I may, this is Kim. I wanted to see if, because I know that you guys have coding starting in grade 3 as extracurricular class, but do you guys see potentially in the future integrating coding into the regular curriculum?
We actually have done some integration of coding into the curriculum. So we worked with a group called STEM Village for a number of years who came in and have done Lego robotics and coding with a number of our classes,
Yep.
basically from grade 5 and up. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of things that have changed over the course of the last year, simply
Yeah.
from a COVID standpoint, and STEM Village is also now focusing more on work in libraries and in other environments rather than schools. So we've been actively working with some other partners. We do have full set of Lego robotics equipment, so we do still incorporate that for the older students as part of what they do in one of their terms in our technology department. So they are still learning that block coding. They are still learning that engineering component of following instructions and putting the robots together. And then they are still going to be using other programs such as Scratch in order to learn some of the basic coding pieces as well.
Oh, okay, that's good to know.
Mhm.
And also, Paul, for example, just like OT or SLP services
Yeah.
that are outside of the tuition, like how much are you looking at, like an approximate fee for that?
All right. Well, it varies a little bit depending on how much families use it. What we do is we always apply for funding through LHIN from the government.
Hmm.
And that has been peeled back over the last number of years. So that has changed. Generally for OT right now, we get an assessment plus 4 sessions funded for OT.
Yeah.
For SLP, we can usually still get an assessment and 10 sessions funded from the
Oh,
government. But there are lots of families who go privately and do private sessions. I know that Andrew, you spoke about OT before as well, and you can maybe talk about the value of choosing to go private, because I know you chose to do that as well.
Yes, I think we benefited from a little bit of funding, Paul, but again, a great thing with just frankly biting the bullet is you've got lots of control. I recall, and Paul, please correct me, I think a kind of a weekly session may have been $100 a week-ish.
Mhm.
I don't know if that sounds in the ballpark. Um, but that has paid off in spades. You know, I think after 2 years of OT, this was in
yeah,
grades 1 and 2,
yeah.
we saw a huge payoff. So it helps in every way that they develop. So if a child could benefit,
Yeah.
go for it.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Okay.
Excellent.
That'll be
Thank
it
you.
for me, Paul. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kim. I'll put the floor back out if anyone else has any questions they would like to ask of Andrea or of the rest of us.
Andrea, so your kids are in grade 6 now, grade 5?
Believe it or not, it's now grade 7.
Okay, so they
Yes,
started in grade 1, I guess.
they did.
I'm just curious because you said that they were initially in a public program for kindergarten and then you decided to move them. And I mean, I'm not, you don't need to tell me the specific challenges or
Yeah.
profile of your children, but I'm just wondering, like, was it the small class sizes exclusively that attracted you? What was the main drawing factor for private and specifically GAA?
Well, I really think my professional background really steered me in the direction of a place which really could deliver if, in fact, we did need additional layers. I mean, in my experience, there's quite a range between many schools which very nicely advocate for certain layers to be added, but it typically then is up to the parent. Maybe they're given some names, but it tends to often be up to the parent to track down the right professionals. And I've definitely had that experience for a year, you know, driving across the city to that particular practitioner. What I loved about the JA model is that you have on site the OT and the speech path if need be. And those are the two big buckets, right? Like my mom is a speech pathologist, so I think she helped me understand that Anytime there's any little interesting thing around speech, that actually correlates with 75% of other interesting learning challenges a child might have. So as soon as I knew they had on site some possible access to the speech path, it got me thinking, right, we can make this all work. It's a streamlined day, it's less traumatic for the child. And the other big piece about it all being on site kind of links in with the cultural stuff. You know, for one of our kids, those supports have never been necessary, but you know, she has come to understand it's actually really normal to get specified help with things. It is not stigmatized. That's my take. And so that learning piece right there, I think especially before kids go into middle school, that's a huge piece for them to understand that it's okay to get some help where you need it.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it's helpful. You know, we're just trying to weigh our options and trying to figure out where our son is going to go for grade 1. So it's interesting to just hear other perspectives. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Just thinking if I have any other questions. Was it particularly that one of your children or both of your children had, like, aside from the small class sizes, was it something that they were struggling with or challenges they were facing in the kindergarten, or was just let's find a place that could support them if they have those challenges in the future?
Well, it was mostly the latter. It was mostly a just in case thing because I had seen in other settings families being confronted with what can be initially somewhat challenging information. You know, say the grade 4, grade 5 level, the family learns that someone is a slightly inefficient reader, for instance. That happens to a lot of kids. It's not really a big deal, but unless that very specific little niggly need is really zeroed in upon and addressed as early as possible, that kind of thing can snowball over time and it leads to frustration and it obviously impacts performance. So I think I was going into this whole grade 1 exploration so keen to kind of troubleshoot ahead of time for any eventuality. I think my tummy was telling me at least one of us was going to need a little bit of something. And again, I was going on just my experience observing kids as an educator, but it was mostly where can we go where most typical needs that might crop up could be addressed as well as possible. Because, you know, if you get these early years right, I'm sure you've heard people say this, boy, oh boy, you've given them terrific bedrock. And then it is easier to stretch yourself and consider different options later on. But, you know, I've got serious bias. I trained as a primary educator, so I come at this in a very unique space.
So maybe this is a question for everybody, this Paul and Kathy, but so let's say there's a child that, giving Andrea's example, you know, has some challenges with reading. How would, in grade 1 or grade 2 or grade 3, like how would the school address that and what would the child be pulled out? Would they be, I'm just wondering how would you help that child?
Excellent. That's a good question. We have a couple of different options and we don't have just one go-to method because different strokes work for different folks. So we have some really fantastic educators here, and I'm sure Andrea can attest to some of them as well, who might work with the students in different ways. So depending on what a child needs, we have one of our resource teachers here who attacks things from the Orton-Gillingham method. So if it's a reading piece, maybe they need that approach. Maybe they need that multisensory approach. Maybe there's a child who would really benefit from things like reading mastery or a direct instruction approach. So one of our educators really focuses on that approach. So finding the right approach to support that student is really essential. And what part of it is, one approach may not work for the entirety of a student's career, because sometimes they can plateau with one approach and then you have to switch it up and do something different. So having some variety in ways to support students with eventualities or with needs that they have is important. So having that lexicon of knowledge and those go-to people, and then being able to plug that into their regular day. And I know Andrea mentioned having to run across the city at night, and that's one thing that I'm really trying to make sure that we avoid as a school, because honestly, the best hours for any student is the hours when they're here. To run across the city at 6 o'clock at night to do some tutoring, you're not going to get the best results. And you know, it's bang for your buck, right? You want to get the best bang for your buck, but you also want to set your child up for the best results. So having it all here is essential. But then it's also great because all of those teachers can be communication. So if your son is working with a resource teacher, that teacher supports the classroom teacher with strategies and with things that they're working on. So everybody can be working in tandem to try and use all of the different pieces that we put into place. So what it looks like for one student may not look like it does for another student. Some students may get withdrawal support. Some may have some support to go into the classroom. It all really depends on what they need. But if you had a child at our school and we noticed that they needed something, we're going to have a conversation about that. And I'm not going to just say, you know what, your child is having trouble with some of the essential skills of phonics or something like that. It will be, this is what we want to do about it. Here's the plan. So, and getting us all on board with that.
Paul, I wonder if this is also an opportunity to explain a little bit about the STEPS program. I don't know.
Absolutely. Did you want to talk about that at all? Just, or would you like me to do that, Andrea?
You really are the expert, but there is another structure, Samantha, which the school has in place, which we used only for 2 years, and just to give us a little bit of a boost, actually, in terms of our writing output. And it had a huge impact. But I'll let Paul describe because he'll be more current.
For sure. So we do have some half-day STEPS program options. And basically what happens is everybody in the school takes math, language, science, and social studies at the same time. And that allows us to have movement between classes to challenge students where they need to be challenged. But we also have the STEPS program, which is a program where students leave their classroom environment and go and work with one of our special education teachers during the math and language block, or during math and language as well as science and social studies as well. And that's for creating a small homogeneous group to really get some focused instruction on areas of growth. And what we're trying to do is take that really small group and really bring those students back up to grade level or reach the target that we set. And typically that takes maybe a year, maybe 2 years, depending on the student. It takes, you know, it takes a little bit of time, but we get there. And then the student goes back into the regular stream class and participates in the regular English class, math class, whatever it ends up being. There's also transition plans that happen with those students. We have one female who is in one of our STEP classes right now. We are working through a transition plan to have her reintegrate back into her regular classroom environment for math, because she's back where she needs to be almost. And then we're still going to be working on the written output and some of the reading pieces for the remainder of the year. But we're hopeful that by term 3, we're going to be able to start reintegration into the regular classroom environment for her. So basically, it's just a smaller, more supportive environment with really targeted instruction in order to fill some gaps.
And Paul, is the STEP included in the tuition, or is that a separate?
The STEPS program does have an extra price tag on it because it is a limited number of spaces in the school. So we have a total of 10 spaces in the school for that STEPS program. At least that's what we have this year. Basically, what happens is every year we take a look at our student body and we figure out what do we need to create program-wise in order to support them. So for this current year, we needed 10 step spots. So that's what we have created. Last year, we actually had another program that had 3 younger students in it in that steps style environment as well. And those students are now a little bit older, so they are in a different environment. Some of them, their needs have changed, so they're not in that environment right now. So we actually have fewer step students this year than we did last year.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
I think when we were in steps, we were in a class of about 5.
Mm-hmm.
So is that identified as like if our son or the child comes to the school and you're meeting them, you would say, and like, is that identified before next school year, or is that something that you're assessing once the school year starts, or like how does that work?
As much as humanly possible, we want to know all of that information well before you begin at the school, because we want to set your son up for success from the moment he gets here. And part of that is having a child visit with us before the school year starts. And that's not just one visit, that's multiple visits. So they get comfort. They get to know the class environment. The class environment gets to know them. They start to do some output work. I work with them as well. So we get an actual natural sense of where their academic skills lie. So when we provide you with an offer of enrollment, we're able to say, this is what we believe your child needs in order to be successful. So that could include things like, we believe that they need to be in the STEPS program, or we believe that they might need some tutoring, and this is how much tutoring we would like to start with, or using our behavior therapist or occupational therapy, all of those pieces. It's nice to be able to be very upfront and very transparent with you, so you're not surprised as we go. Now, having said that, are there times when we have to make other decisions throughout the school year and scaffold things in? Absolutely, it does happen. But as much as possible, it's nice to do it in advance. I know Andrea's been through those meetings and lived that with me as well. So
They were always very humane, very kind. No, I think if you feel your family would value feeling themselves as part of a team, I think you would find that at JA.
Sorry,
Hi,
Paul, I have to drop off, but is there a recording available after the Zoom?
yes, Our Kids is recording this. That was
Perfect.
one of their stipulations on the roundtable. So they will have it available in their portal afterwards.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Paul, and nice to meet you guys.
Thank you very much, Kim. Appreciate you coming.
Okay, bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Sorry, Seth, I think you were.
Yeah, hi. Thanks. Not, I had to join a bit late, so hopefully this isn't a repeat. I apologize if it is, but I was curious to know about pull-out classes. If, like, for example, a child is like 2 years ahead in math and reading, is that something that can be accommodated? How would that work?
Yes. Andrea, can I use one of your children as a brief example without giving too much away?
Yes, just
Okay.
fine. Yeah.
So one of Andrea's children right now does get some pull-out time with one of our specialists at the school, and it's not for remediation, it's for extension work, because he needs to engage his brain in a different way. And that specialist is working with him to look at things from a different lens and engage in a different way. And that's primarily what he's doing right now with her. So that's one way we do it. The other thing that we do is, obviously we have our math, our language, our science, our social studies at the same time every day, so we can engage students at different levels. Right now we have one boy who is in grade 8 who's doing his grade 9 math credit, because last year he left the grade 7 class and went to the grade 8 class and did math at that level. We have a boy in our grade 6-7 class right now who's doing grade 7 science, because cognitively that's what he should be doing, not the grade 6 science. We have a grade 2 who's doing his grade 4 math right now. So we do have the ability to support students at different grade levels. Obviously this year, it was a little bit more complicated to do that because of the cohorting piece. So we had to be a little bit more inventive with how we created those cohorts. But typically in the past, it was quite simply, you leave your class and you go to the other classroom where you're going to be doing your grade level material, be it in English, math, whatever. So that's how we've been able to really support students who are working ahead.
And just to chime in, Paul, on one thing that I think parents often worry about with that, my perception, I get interesting reports from our daughter in particular, is that it's very normal. Like between these different classes, kids are moving around the building anyway. So the shuffle between rooms is not a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for adding that in. There is a natural transition happening, and it is just a normal piece. Every classroom has some type of movement happening at the same time. So there is no stigma attached to going to a different grade class for what you're working on.
I think too, I'd like just to add one thing is that also we do quite a bit of project-based learning in our school. And this is an amazing opportunity for kids to dive into something they're super interested in and to take it to the next level. So that's also a great opportunity for students in our school to reach ahead or work ahead with the helping hands of the teacher or independently in the older grades.
Seth, did that help?
Yes, thank you. That was very helpful. I appreciate it.
Wonderful.
I had a question.
Yes, Elliot.
You jump in. My question is more around how you would sort of describe the curriculum. Is it more traditional, like fundamental, or is it more like experimental? I don't know. How do you describe it? Like obviously, you know, when I grew up, it was more like you learn sort of the multiplication tables, addition, like in a step-by-step manner. Like, are there programs that you follow, or what? How would you define the academic approach of the school?
For sure. There are obviously programs that we use as some guiding programs for things like literacy and numeracy. We have jump math for everybody at the school. We use Lucy Calkins Writer's Workshop for a writing program, but there's no one program that is the be all and end all for every single thing that you do for any subject. And I think that one of the things that I know is wonderful about our teaching staff is they don't just follow something for the sake of following it, because you lose all of sense of differentiation and teaching to students' strengths, because different students are going to need some different approaches. You're never going to have a grade where everyone's at the same level and you can deliver one lesson and it hits everyone and everybody's learning style. So it's really about figuring out what the different learning styles are in the school and being able to hit those in the class. So that might mean some students in primary grades will benefit from using touch math. Some students will benefit from having the jump math approach. So there might be multiple activities going on in a classroom, and that will support a variety of different learners. What we will be doing is we will always be looking back at the curriculum, and we will follow the Ontario curriculum. That's what we use as the basis for what we do. But we also have those other little bits and pieces in there, like the LEAP program. So that's our project-based learning piece that Kathy had referenced earlier, where students can dive down the rabbit hole and they can look at something that they're really interested in and really let their strengths shine as they do that. So from an academic perspective, we do follow the Ontario curriculum, but there's lots of nuanced ways that we're able to do those things. I know Andrea mentioned earlier about academics, that academics, even though we have a supportive approach and we support different types of learners and we have other services, academics don't go by the wayside. All of those essential skills are still being taught, and students are leaving here with the pieces that they need to be successful, you know, when they're heading off to high schools or wherever they're going next. Kathy or Andrea, did you want to add anything in that I may have missed on that one?
I think that the one part of our school that is progressive is our little extra classes like that project-based class, but also we have a program called Flex here. And this is, the Flex stands for friendships, learning skills, and executive functioning. And we have a class actually in the schedule called Flex. And the kids say, oh, what do you have next? Oh, I have Flex. This means they're going into a classroom and they're having direct instruction on learning skills, responsibility, collaboration. They're talking about how to be a friend. That looks different in grade 1 than grade 8, but they're certainly having this continuous conversation and instruction, and especially executive functioning. How do I get myself organized? How do I attack a project? So I think this class in particular is quite progressive, and also our outdoor education is very progressive. We go across the street, we go into the Canadian Film Institute, we've got this massive place that we can go and explore. That also is progressive. We do art and nature, science, math, games. We do flex classes in OE, right? So it's really, the interaction between these courses is quite interesting, quite progressive. So when you say, you know, where would we lie in terms of traditional versus progressive or experimental? Certainly traditional basics, but with that progressive flair of meeting our kids where they need it. What, you know, and the kids, what do they need for high school? What do they need to survive out there? How do they communicate? How do they hold themselves? And that is directly taught. We're not expecting kids just to learn that through osmosis.
Right, right.
One little detail I would mention, and this is just again as an observer, is I think although there are the occasional interesting days in the calendars, there might be a ski day. The kids, for instance, love pizza lunch days. But by and large, my observation is that 99% of the calendar remains very consistently followed. So I think for the kids, they seem to have a very predictable, familiar day. And just protecting that instructional time as much as Jay does, I think that's a deceptively often underestimated in other places.
Thank you, Andrea.
That's helpful. Yeah, thanks.
Excellent.
I think we've had opportunities to ask you lots of questions, so I don't know if anyone else has any questions, but I think we've got our questions mostly answered, so that's good.
Okay, perfect. And I know that asking questions in this venue is one thing, but I also invite families to come in and actually see us in business. It's different to just talk. And it's a great way to get information, but there's something else to be said about coming into the building and feeling the energy of the building and looking into the classrooms and seeing what's happening in the classrooms while students are here. That's the most telling piece. And I think that's very important for families to do, is to actually see us while we're in motion. And yay, we can do that now too. Well, if there aren't any other questions right now, I will say thank you so much to everybody who has joined us today. I really appreciate you coming to this roundtable. That was wonderful. And Andrea, thank you so much for giving of your time. I know how busy your days are, and I appreciate you sharing your experience with us here at JA.
My pleasure, Paul.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. And if you would like to follow up about a tour or anything along those lines, feel free to contact us at the school.